Hello, Connolly.
No.
This video contains spoilers, so consider watching the film first before you continue. And if you like what you see, click the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to click the little bell to be notified for new videos. In the spring of 1981, Sergeant Stephen King, a patrol officer on the campus of California State Long Beach, spotted two people carrying what appeared to be M16 rifles on campus. Assuming they were the people responsible for a rash of burglaries in the area, King approached them with his sidearm drawn and ordered them to lay down their weapons. According to the police report, the woman, Julia Gissel, complied with the order. But 19-year-old sophomore Michael Reagan went into a shooting stance, leaving King to shoot Reagan 3 times in the chest. Reagan was rushed to the hospital where he later recovered, but it was only after the shooting that the officer realized that the guns were wooden replicas that shot rubber bands. Gissel and Reagan were competitors in a campus game of Assassin, a wildly popular game in the early 1980s that fell somewhere between a scavenger hunt and Pokemon Go. The coincidence is that, only 4 months earlier, Hollywood had already wrapped principal photography in a small thriller called Tag, the Assassination Game, starring Robert Carradine and a then unknown Linda Hamilton, and future Mr. Linda Hamilton, Bruce Abbott. And while it looks like a standard issue 1980s slasher, in the hands of Michael Myers himself, Nick Castle, it's a cynical deconstruction of the concept known as the magic circle. So what exactly is the magic circle? That's a term from Dutch historian Johan Huizinga, and it's the idea that games are a safe, separate space where the rules of the world don't apply. To illustrate, this is former Kansas City Chiefs running back Christian Okoye. Now, at 6'1" and about 250 pounds, Okoye was listed as a fullback, a guy who usually blocks for the other players. But he was utilized as a running back, a guy who actually gets to carry the ball. So solid and quick was Okoye that he was a nightmare to tackle. He was big enough to push people over and fast enough to put momentum behind that girth. In fact, sports writers began referring to Okoye as the Nigerian Nightmare. And if you only know football through video games, Okoye is most notable for his nigh invulnerability in Tecmo Super Bowl. And I bring all this up because you're about to see the Nigerian Nightmare get his shit rocked by Denver Broncos safety Steve Atwater in one of the hardest hits in NFL history.
Okoye up the middle. And he is knocked dead in his tracks.
Now, if someone were to do this on the street, that's a felony. But inside the magic circle, it's just the end of the play. The magic circle is a sociological term for a context or a space where the real world ends and a state of play begins. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a circle, a field, the court, the stage, and in the era of video games and the internet, a screen. These are all magic circles where you stop being the person you are in daily life and become a different person with different objectives, different drives, and different rules. Maybe even sometimes, different personalities. But in Tag, the circle undergoes a catastrophic failure. The conceptual foundation of Tag, the Assassination Game, was laid early in 1981, during a period when collegiate role-playing games were moving from the fringes of campus life into the national spotlight.
It's magical, mystical, and it's mesmerizing the young people and adults across the country.
Nick Castle, who had already secured his place in horror history as The Shape in John Carpenter's Halloween, and as a co-writer of Escape from New York, was looking to establish himself as a director in his own right. Castle's interest in the project was piqued by reports in the Los Angeles Times regarding the real-life Assassination Game, which at the time was being played at more than 50 major universities across the country. During the 1980s, this game proliferated across college campuses. And it makes sense when you put it into context. We're talking about a generation existing in the shadow of a Cold War, living in this sterile, highly structured academic environment. There was a desire for high-stakes excitement, but wrapped comfortably in a safe, controlled experience. There was a way to inject a palpable sense of danger and thrill into the mundane routine of going to lectures and eating in the dining hall. To really understand why this game gripped people so fiercely, we have to go back to the ludological theory known as the magic circle. Inside this circle, the rules of the real world are temporarily suspended, and the rules of the game take absolute authority.
Full start. Offense. Everybody but the center.
By stepping into the circle of Tag, Players are voluntarily stepping out of reality and into a distorted, fantastical realm where stalking and killing are not just acceptable, they are the primary objectives. But why do this? What are the psychological benefits of simulating murder? Well, first off, there's agency. It turns a boring, predictable campus into a complex recreational landscape. Every corner, every shadow, every fellow student suddenly has meaning and purpose. It effectively cures existential boredom. Then there's the catharsis. It allows players to safely navigate that deeply primal predatory and prey instinct that society has otherwise conditioned out of us. It's an aggressive, raw part of the human psyche, given a totally harmless outlet. And finally, there's community. The players develop this shared secret language, a clandestine bond that alienates outsiders but brings the participants closer together. It brings up a fascinating paradox, though. Why on earth do we actually enjoy the stress of being hunted? It sounds counterintuitive. But the truth is, the adrenaline of the game provides a simulated, hyper-focused meaning that our everyday lives so often lack. When you are being actively hunted, you aren't worrying about your impending midterms, or your student debt, or your messy breakup. Your only objective is survival. It's a visceral experience that simplifies existence down to its most basic, thrilling core. Which brings us to the core narrative of the film, and the brilliantly executed double roleplay between our protagonists, Susan and Alex. Susan Swayze, played by a pre-Terminator Linda Hamilton, is the most written by a man-female character ever. She's beautiful, mysterious, understated. She cares about important things, not just hair and makeup, but all the literature and Roman military history I like. Alex Marsh, played by a pre-Revenge of the Nerds Robert Carradine, develops an interest in reporting on the game after falling for Susan at first sight. And ballad. I mean, it's 1982 Linda Hamilton, what are you gonna do? Susan is written as a dream girl, because Alex is an unironic, performative male who sits alone in his room smoking cigars and reading Raymond Chandler. As a result, he spends most of the movie talking like Humphrey Bogart, if Bogart spent his days in a filthy dorm wearing tidy whities. Susan is the quintessential ambitious college student, and Alex is the jaded skeptic who is simultaneously reporting on the game and using his access as a journalist to get into Susan's pants. On the other hand, we have Lauren Gersh. Lauren is our antagonist, but calling him a villain is almost too generous. He's a loser. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as a clinical diagnosis, which I am totally qualified to give. He's an expert at the game, but that's all he's good at.
3 kills in a day. That's even fast for you, Gersh.
It was easy. Competition's shitty this round. There's no challenge anymore.
And it's clear the other players can't stand him and resent the fact that he keeps winning. The games master even calls him out for being a greasy slob when he should be an ambassador for the game.
Well, if you're gonna win all the time, I wish you'd at least clean up your act. You're bad for the image, Lauren.
Carpenter wants James Bond, ordering a martini, Schraker not stud. That's some grubby schlub whose shirt is probably 80% Planner's cheeseballs dust. Gersh is a stereotypical gamer, an angry white guy who lacks a sense of fashion and hygiene. But hey, at least he makes up for it by having an abrasive personality.
Never happened, Carpenter. And you know it. Never!
And as stereotypical as Gersh is, you either know a Lauren Gersh, or you are a Lauren Gersh. So the character is easily legible. Unfortunately for Lauren, life is not a meritocracy, and the multi-time champion gets eliminated on a stroke of bad luck when his clumsy target displays poor trigger discipline and accidentally knocks his gun off the shelf in the shower, taking Lauren out. It's an inauspicious way for the legendary Lauren Gersh to end his college career, jobbing once again to his mortal enemy, the shower. Unless he returns later and shoots his victim with real bullets so no one finds out. And since everyone makes fun of him anyway, and he's gonna be matriculating off campus to become a big wheel down at the Cracker Factory, leaving the game and his identity as a winner behind, he wants to go out with a bang. Or several. That puts him on a collision course with Susan Swayze. And by proxy, Alex, her boy Friday. This brings us to the core of the film's Lacanian nightmare. French philosopher/sociologist Jacques Lacan, Jacques Lacan, Jacques Lacan, Jacques Lacan,
let me rock it, Shaka Khan. Let me rock it, that's all I wanna do.
French philosopher/sociologist Jacques Lacan theorized that we don't really have an inner self. We develop our identity based on our interactions with the symbols we interact with and how they define us. In a university setting, your identity is entirely contingent upon your rank. You are your GPA. You are your college Q rating. You are your standing in the hierarchy. This is what Louis Althusser called interpolation. The way an institution shouts at you until you agree that you are exactly what they say you are. You see, Lauren is the reigning champion of tag until he gets killed by a random nerd in a freak accident. And for Lauren, this isn't just losing the game. It's a meritocratic castration. Games are run on rules, and rules evenly applied are supposed to be fair and allow for the best players to rise to the top. And because this fluke kill saw one of the worst players in the game eliminating the best, it can't be fair.
It wasn't in your hand. It was an accident.
There's no rule that says it has to be in your hand.
Anger, by definition, is when our goals are interrupted by a source that we feel is unfair, or somehow otherwise improper. So when Captain Anger Issues is unceremoniously dumped from the game, it only exacerbates his already existing rage issue. He never developed a personality to speak of, and he has no friends. His only winning quality is his dominance of the game. And that went down the shower on a fluke. When Lauren loses his title, he loses his place in the symbolic order. He stops being a winner and becomes a nothing. And how does a socially inadequate man-child reestablish his phallic potency when a toy gun fails him? He switches to real bullets. He decides if he can't win the simulation, he'll just puncture the simulation with the real world. It's a weightily conceived bit of character work. His transition to a murderer isn't motivated by a supernatural curse or a mass trauma. It's motivated by the fact that he's a mediocre man who just can't handle being a beta in a system that all but promised him alpha status if he could just kill people.
Good work, Gersh. Looks like you're on your way to another title.
The real bullets are his way of saying, you can't ignore me if I'm killing you. It's the ultimate temper tantrum of the disenfranchised ego. The genius, and I use that word with a healthy amount of 80s slasher movie irony, is how the film uses its neo-noir aesthetic. Even though it's set on a sunny UCLA campus, at times the movie looks like a 1940s detective film because they let Nick Castle do whatever the hell he wanted, and he's a big nerd. Long shadows, Venetian blinds, the whole detective in a trench coat bit. This is, of course, a stylistic choice, but it also reflects how these students perceive themselves within the game. They think that they're living in a high-stakes thriller, but they're actually just participating in a bureaucracy of play. We're meant to see that overtly with Lauren because he introduces real killings into a game about fake killings. But Alex and Susan are also guilty of that disappearance into a world of play, even without the game. Alex thinks his life is a film noir, with dames who'd sew you down the river just as sure as Tim Dines will buy $1, see? And she's all too willing to be cast in the role of femme fatale. Although, you can tell the most dangerous thing she's ever done is order a double shot of espresso before a dilly-dally session at TJ Maxx. When Alex adopts the persona of the world-weary, cynical journalist, and Susan retaliates with the poise of the elite competitor, they are engaging in what sociologist George Simmel calls sociability. The interaction has no purpose other than the pleasure of the interaction itself. For them, romance is a game of witty repartee, where the unspoken rule is that neither participant can allow the other to have the final word. This verbal sparring mirrors the physical stealth of the tag game. They're constantly testing each other's psychological perimeters without ever explicitly declaring their intentions.
So you're a psychology major. I was reading something just the other day about the mind. It was H.J. Epnick's Criticisms on Freud.
You're not a psychology major.
No?
There is a mutual respect for the quality of the performance. The romance only progresses because they both adhere to the unspoken rule of non-vulgarity. They never drop the act too early. Even their moments of vulnerability are framed within the context of their roles. If the tag game is a simulation of espionage, their romance is a simulation of old Hollywood noir archetypes. They are essentially role-playing a Bogart-Bacall dynamic within a 1980s slasher setting.
You know how to whistle, just put your lips together. Put your lips together and blow.
This is a form of mimicry, the play of masks. In the final act, the romance must transition from ludus, or structured, rule-bound play, to genuine intersuch activity. They are forced to step out of their masks to survive, which effectively kills the playful, flirtatious dynamic they had cultivated, forcing them to sink or swim in a real-life, unsimulated romance.
Ben!
Anthropologist David Graeber distinguished between play something we do for ourselves and for fun, and games, play that has externalities, such as rules, scoring, rankings, hierarchies, and records attached to it. While play allows us to stretch our imaginations and expand our horizons, games necessarily restrict that growth under the bureaucracy of structure. Instead of running around trying to tag each other when we're 5 years old, an activity that relies on our imagination, problem solving, and burgeoning athleticism, we improve the game by adding rules, until we reach the point of arbitration hearings over what is and what is not base, and the merits of Marbury versus touchbacks. Lauren especially has fallen into the game trap mentality. Maybe the Assassination Game was about fun at one time, but at some point it became about the extrinsic reward of respect from his peers.
You know what second place is? Nothing!
And obviously, when taken to an extreme, that's a problem. When Susan eventually has to face Lauren, she's finding the logical conclusion of the game itself. The game demands a winner. And in a meritocracy that commodifies violence, the only way to truly win is to be the last one left standing when the magic circle finally collapses. For David Graeber, the problem is always the real world seeping in and corrupting the magic circle, stifling our ability to imagine and develop our own ways to solve problems, because the rigid rules negate the whole point of the play. But for Lauren Gersh, and I dare say a lot of people, especially Americans, and especially American men, and especially young American men whose identities are still forming, the problem tends to be the opposite. Or, I guess more precisely, the problem tends to be cyclical. The magic circle provides the stability, predictability, status, and camaraderie that the real world doesn't. So the more aspects of the magic circle you can port over to real life, the better you'll feel. Even if one of those aspects is that nothing matters and there's no accountability because none of this is real. And therein lies Lauren Gersh's insanity. If we look at the psychology of Lauren Gersh, it is a case of a hollow, mediocre man being good at one thing, and so that becomes his entire identity. He clearly has no sexual game. Though he's not unattractive physically, he doesn't seem to be all that invested in academics, despite being on a prestigious college campus. He gives minimal effort to his dress or developing a personality. For him, there is just the game. This means winning isn't just a momentary thrill for him, it's the foundation of his existence. He has built his entire self-worth around being the unstoppable legend of the game. So the ultimate fear for Gersh isn't losing a match. If he loses, he effectively ceases to exist. He loses the only identity that gives him any sense of authority or power, because it certainly wasn't his charm. This leads to a collapse of what philosophers call the illusory attitude, the internal state where we accept the rules of a game just for the sake of play. You accept that you're going to get hit hard. You accept that you can't interfere with the ball when it's over the cylinder. You accept a designated hitter. What you don't accept is these rules having any relevance outside of the circle. Gersh begins to suffer from hyperludosis, where the meaning of the world is only understood through the game. When he's killed in the game, he doesn't accept the play death. He resorts to real death to maintain his status. He is the ultimate cautionary tale of a player who can no longer find the exit to the magic circle. For Gersh, the boundaries between play and consequences are eradicated. The logic of the game supersedes all moral, ethical, and legal reality. It's the epitome of a broken mind trying to impose its own distorted rules onto a real world. To him, the game is significantly more real than life itself, because the game is the only place where he feels truly in control.
You dead?
I'm not dead. You shot me, but my heart's still beating. I can't die!
He is a tragic figure who has been swallowed by his own delusion.
That's not fair.
So to wrap all of this up, the ludic appeal of the hunt and tag is what draws us in. It taps into our desire for agency, adrenaline, and purpose. Tag is a cautionary tale about what happens when the magic circle moves beyond enclosing the game to swallowing the player whole. It makes it clear that our grip on reality is sometimes vastly more fragile than we want to admit, and that the masks we wear for fun can very easily become our permanent faces. In the end, the most dangerous thing about playing the Assassination Game isn't being caught by your hunter, it's forgetting that you were ever playing a game at all. Stay cool, stay safe, wash your hands, return your shopping carts, make your choices, and I'll see you next time.
Shot through the heart, and you're to blame. You get